Hey GBA fans, welcome back once again to the weekly recap, this time for week 4 of the GBA D League. I am of course Choice CJ and I'm joined by my co-host Zilix. Say hello, Zilix.
Sorry everybody, Zilix here.
And there was a lot of very interesting games this week, including one that was very highly anticipated, so let's just hop right on into it and go into our first game. This was between the Texas Rangers, coached by HLD Productions, aka Randy, and the Newcastle Umbreon, coached by Aberforth. Randy brought Tapu Koko, Mega Scizor, Hawlucha, Alolan Muck, Jellicent, and Celebi. Meanwhile, Aberforth brought Crobat, Alolan Persian, Emboar, Jirachi, Rotom, and Como-O. There was two Scarfmons that started out in the lead matchup. It was a Celebi versus a Crobat. Crobat goes for a U-turn, gets off a nice chunk on the Celebi, but the Rotom comes in and has to get sacked to 2 Psychics from the Celebi, so right off the bat, Abe is a little bit on the back foot, but Abe smartly goes into his Persian, which is of course immune to the Psychic, and is able to parting shot on the predicted Koko switch in, and brings in the Crobat, which is in a position to threaten it out, because Randy doesn't of course know that it is a Scarf Crobat at this point. Jelly comes in on the Cross Poison, doesn't really care, scalds the incoming Persian and lands a burn, which is really nice, but then Persian continues to get whittled by taking a Dazzling Gleam to the face while getting off a Toxic in exchange. So the Persian not going to be too useful for the rest of the match. But Koko does come in again for Randy's side on another parting shot from the Emboar. Or sorry, Koko comes in once again and takes another parting shot from the Persian, as this time Abe goes into the Emboar and just clicks Flare Blitz. This is a good opportunity for Randy to go into his Jellicent, and the recoil damage really racks up on that Emboar, taking Flare Blitz recoil, Rocky Helmet recoil, etc., and it's able to take it out with the Wild Charge. Koko comes in, hits the Assault Vest Jirachi on the switch in with a Thunderbolt, and follows up with a Gigavolt Havoc, able to knock that out. And with that, just as it's kind of been all season for the Texas Rangers, once the one check to Koko gets eliminated, that thing sort of runs in hard on his opponent's team. The Crobat does come in. It does threaten out that Koko once again, going for U-turn as Celebi gets sacked. But then the Como-O comes in, which of course invites in that Koko, and Koko is able to knock out the Persian, as that is Abe's sack. Crobat comes in once again, but the Crobat clicks Cross Poison on the Mega Scizor switch in. Scizor is able to click Aerial Ace a bunch of times and get a kill on Emboar, get a kill on a really cool Como-O set, a set up a Totemize with Z Belly Drum set, and then also kill the Crobat with 2 Bullet Punches, and it's going to be a 4-0 victory for the Texas Rangers. So Randy did a really good job of just applying so much offensive pressure with the Koko in particular, but the Scizor really coming in clutch in the end game there and catching him the win.
I think what I am interested from in this match is Abe mentioned that he had some surprise sets on like the Rotom, for example, and also a surprise move on the Emboar that we didn't get to see, but he said he might bring them in future weeks. So I'm interested to see what's happening there.
Indeed, I'll definitely be waiting on pins and needles for those secret texts to be coming out. But unfortunately, they didn't help him out in this game, so maybe that'll be better the next time around.
So in our next matchup, we have Gregulator from the LA Colville and Magic from the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, as you can see on screen, we have a little bit of an upset here, Magic getting his first victory. I believe most people in Pick'ems probably would have picked Regulator, but no, Magic taking the win here, and he brought a team of Landers T, Mega Venusaur, Kartana, Jolteon, Gardevoir, Arcanine, and Gregulator brought the team of Zygarde 50%, Rotomosh, Golisopod, Celesteela, Nihilego, and Mega Gallade. Greg, he leads off with his Zygarde, and Magic has his Landers up front. They both trade damage here with the ground type attack, Zygarde going for the 1000 arrows, Landers going for the Earthquake, doing about 40% to each other. This, funnily enough, scares them both out, and they both switch. Now this is kind of a trend throughout the battle, they both switch at the same time a lot, which I thought was kind of funny. They, were predicting each other to switch, but they didn't often predict the right switch in, so that'll be a trend throughout this. So now it is the Arcanine versus Golisopod on the field. This allows the Arcanine to burn the Golisopod pretty early on, which is nice, as the Golisopod is able to get 2 layers of spikes, one on the first turn and the other on the following turn, taking a little bit of damage from the Arcanine, not enough to send it out with the emergency exit yet. And then both sides switch yet again. Greg goes into his Nihilego to try to get up rocks, while Magic brings in Kartana, which forces the Nihilego out, not wanting to take big damage from the Kartana. And the Nihilego goes into the Celesteela, which allows Magic to reveal the Defog Kartana, which caught Greg off guard because he was expecting no hazard removal, but the Kartana was carrying the Defog, able to get away the spikes. Then the Arcanine comes back out, taking a bit of damage, but is quickly able to heal it off with a Morning Sun, allowing the Nihilego to come back in to set up the rocks on the incoming Venusaur, which Mega Evolves and knocks off the incoming Celesteela. Now the Celesteela attempts to Toxic, predicting a switch, but the Venusaur does stay in and go for a Leech Seed. Then both coaches swap yet again, sending in Golisopod and Jolteon. The Aqua Jet hits the Jolteon to get some chip damage, while the Jolteon puts Golisopod in range of the emergency exit, and Greg sends in his Nihilego, taking a Thunder Wave from the Jolteon, as Jolteon does take a Power Gem from the Nihilego, barely being alive after that attack. As then both coaches switch yet again, as Greg opts to get in another spike, and then predicting the Kartana to come in to remove the hazard that was set up, he goes into Celesteela. The Kartana does decide to remove the hazards and then gets knocked out by the Celesteela's Air Slash. Following this, Magic is able to knock out the Golisopod with Arcanine's Rocky Helmet damage after taking a little bit of damage from like an Aqua Jet. Then Greg goes into his Rotomosh, scaring out the Arcanine with a potential Hydro Pump and Volt Switches on the incoming Mega Venusaur, which is able to knock off the Nihilego as it gets fully paralyzed, and then he Leech Seeds. But the Nihilego is able to get up rocks as the Venusaur continues Leech Seeding incoming Mons, getting a decent amount of damage off on Greg's entire team with Leech Seed and some of the burns he set up from earlier on. Eventually, Greg goes into his Gallade as Magic intimidates it with the Arcanine. The Arcanine takes a bit of damage, but then burns the incoming Rotomosh. At this point, a lot of the Mons on Greg's team are like super weak now, so he does have a plan to potentially sweep with Gallade, but at the same time, Magic has a plan to stop a potential sweep because he does have a Scarf Gardevoir in the back. Eventually, after all of this Leech Seeding, the Celesteela does go down. This allows Greg to go into his Gallade, gets up a Swords Dance, but then takes an Intimidate and Extreme Speed damage. The Gallade knocks out the Arcanine, and then the Gardevoir comes in to Revenge Kill and takes out the Nihilego. The Rotom comes in and sets up a light screen as the Venusaur comes in on the Rotom. The Rotom Volt Switches into Zygarde and gets Leech Seeded by the Venusaur. Magic then goes into Landorus and surprises Greg with a Gravity and knocks out the incoming Rotomosh with a Z Tectonic Rage. Greg then attempts to take out the Landorus with a Zen Headbutt, but misses out on the KO, giving Landorus another kill on the Gallade, and then Greg is able to knock out the Landorus with Zygarde, but Magic is able to bring in his Gardevoir, finishing the match with a 3-0 in Magic's favor.
Yeah, I'm pretty proud of Magic this week. He was able to take some learnings from his loss to Astra, aka hazards are bad and you should get rid of them, and brought Defog Kartana to this game. And that really made a huge difference. It really screwed up with Greg's game plan, and I don't think he was able to mentally recover from that, sort of making some plays down the stretch, such as Earthquaking with his Zygarde while the Lando was still around, and things like that. That really put Magic in the favorable position.
I really like that Gravity set. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great choice. Lando is just so good this gen because it can run sets like that and obliterate teams, just period. So with that, we'll go on to game number 3, which was between the Durham Ratigans, coached by 6 Hacks, aka Leo, and his opponent was the New York Lynx, coached by Papa C. Leo brought Greninja, Mega Aerodactyl, Kyurem Black, Raichu, Tapu Fini, and Bronzong. Meanwhile, Papa C brought Hoopa Unbound, Gigalith, Excadrill, Manaphy, Haxorus, and Sylveon. Greninja comes out on first turn versus Manaphy. He's going to pivot right into the Fini as Fini takes a Surf, and the Manaphy is going to stop playing around and go right for Tail Glow on the Nature's Madness. But Leo smartly recognizes that his arrow can come in on the obvious Energy Ball and threaten out that Manaphy. and Mega Arrow is going to be able to get an easy 2-hit KO on the Gigalith with Stone Edge plus Aqua Tail. Excadrill comes in, and that lures in the Bronzong, and Bronzong's going to be able to whittle down the Excadrill, even though the Excadrill's packing a real cool tech. It's got the Magnet Rise, so it can dodge the Earthquakes from Bronzong. It's the Rocky Helmet that's on Bronzong that's really putting in the chip and putting damage on that thing. But Leo is able to stall out the Sand with the Bronzong, also with switching in Tapu Fini once during that exchange. And it gets in range of Water Shuriken from Greninja, and Greninja's going to be able to take that thing out. Papa C tries to get a little momentum going, bringing in Haxorus and clicking Dragon Dance, but Greninja does land a crit with the Dark Pulse, allowing it to kill the next turn with Water Shuriken, so that didn't work out. Manaphy's going to come in, take a Dark Pulse, but it's going to be able to knock out that Greninja finally with the Twinkle Tackle. Raichu comes in, has no reason to click anything but Volt Switch, and is able to pivot out as the Hoopa switches in. And the Arrow can kill with the Aqua Tail because the Volt Switch did get a crit, putting it in guaranteed range of Aqua Tail. Then the Arrow is able to get off a chunk onto the Sylveon with Stone Edge, and then the Sylveon kills with Hyper Voice. But that allows then the Raichu to come in, click Thunderbolt twice versus the Sylveon and the Manaphy. And it results in a 3-0 win for Leo and the Durham Ratigans. So a pretty nice victory once again on Leo's part. After losing in week 1 to Jolt, he has come up with a 3-game winning streak, and this one felt kind of dominant again.
Yeah, I mean, on like just paper, it kind of looks punch for punch, but if you actually like, you know, break the battle down, he had the momentum almost every turn. There were a couple crits, but he did explain in his commentary that they didn't really matter too much. Like, for example, one allowed him to go for Aqua Tail instead of a Stone Edge, just higher accuracy, but he could have still got the knockout with the Stone Edge. Maybe he would have missed, who knows.
Exactly, so Leo is starting to look like a major threat as this season goes on.
So next up, we have Donfnatic versus Danykey. Donfnatic brought a roster of Electivire, Floatzel, Volcarona, Registeel, Latias, and Mega Lopunny, while Danykey had the Froslass, Garchomp, Magearna, Mega Absol, Darmanitan, and Suicune. Starting off the battle, we have Electivire versus Froslass. The Evire Volt switches and goes into Lopunny. Now, I assume he predicted a spike, but instead he takes a burn from the Froslass, and he attempts to go for a high jump kick, but takes massive damage since the Froslass predicts the Lopunny to go for that and protects. Not very good, but what are you going to do? The Lopunny then Toxics as the Froslass does set up the layer of spikes this turn, and it's not looking too great for Donfnatic right off the bat, but he then switches in his Volcarona predicting an Ice Beam, as Danykey switches out his Froslass and goes into Garchomp, while the Volcarona attempts to set up a Quiver Dance. However, the Garchomp is scarfed and knocks out the Volcarona with an Earthquake. The Latias then comes in to scare out the Garchomp, which he does, and he predicts the Magearna to come in and goes for an Earthquake, popping its Choco Berry. The Magearna then sets up a Trick Room versus the Registeel, going for an Aura Sphere, which the Registeel takes nicely due to the Chople Berry getting off Seismic Toss damage versus the Magearna. Danykey then predicts another Seismic Toss and goes into Froslass. And then he allows his Froslass to go down to Registeel's Iron Head, disabling it with the Curse Body. Then Dan brings in his Mega Absol, and since the Registeel isn't able to go for the Iron Head in the Trick Room, he does switch out, going into Lopunny, allowing it to go down to the Superpower. The Floatzel then comes in, which kind of freely brings in the Suicune, since it's a great resist. But predicting the Suicune to come in, Jack doubles into his Latias, removing the layer of spikes as Suicune sets up a Calm Mind. Now this is beginning to spell the end. The Lati does very little damage as the Suicune continues to set up Calm Minds. The Registeel comes in to Seismic Toss the Suicune. Suicune is almost able to take out the Registeel with Scalds. It is a bit unfortunate for Jack though that the Registeel didn't go down, as it would have allowed him to go into Evire and go for a Thunder Punch, which would have knocked out the Suicune. But since his Registeel was able to survive, Danykey goes for more Calm Minds and rests up to full health. The Suicune then knocks out the Registeel. It is able to survive the Electivire's Thunder Punch because it was able to get up a rest, knocks it out with a Scald. Jack then attempts to take out the Suicune in any way he can, but it is unable to do anything to it, and Danykey Wanting to speed things up, he goes into his Absol to pick off the Latios for the final kill, giving Danykey a 5-0 victory.
People, maybe I'm just speaking for myself here, Suicune always seems to screw teams up just because it's so fat. Like, it's, you know, it's not that much less bulky than things like Cresselia that often gives teams trouble. And so these bulky sets with Calm Mind and Rest are just so hard to deal with, and I don't think that Donfnatic had the proper answers. It was also just unfortunate that he couldn't get his Electivire in at the right time. If the Suicune had been low enough, then maybe he could have brought it back, but it just didn't work out for him.
Not only that, but he did play pretty risky with his offensive threats early on, allowing Megalopony to get burned and take quite a lot of damage, as well as allowing the Volcarona to go down to an Earthquake very, very early on in the battle. Was not too great of a decision as it turned out later on.
So last but not least, we do have our most anticipated match of this young season. We have Token Minorities Jolt, coach of the Toronto Staraptors, going up against Astra J, coach of the Montreal Habsols. Both teams coming into this game were 3-0 with a +11 differential, so this was a battle of the best. Jolt did bring his Seismitoad, his Mew, his Mega Kangaskhan, Cobalion, Scolipede, and Tornadus T. Meanwhile, Astra brought Blastoise, Umbreon, Cresselia, Salamence, Zangoose, and Piloswine. This is sort of a long game, so I'm going to do my best to summarize some of the turns, but we will start off with Mega Blastoise versus Seismitoad on the lead. Seismitoad is going to switch out into the Tornadus T, which has a lot of bulk investment to handle a Blastoise, but the Blastoise does land a Toxic on Torn immediately, and going for some chip damage on the Blastoise, Torn goes for Hurricane and does miss, ends up taking a Scald in exchange. Not wanting the Torn to get too much more weakened, he does go into the Seismitoad. Toad gets hit by a Dark Pulse, and then the Toad's able to get off a Toxic on the Blastoise, so the chipping process has started, but just not at quite the rate that Jolt was probably hoping for. The Torn comes back in, scaring out the Blastoise into the Cresselia, and the Cresselia also dodges a Hurricane. And he is going to U-turn on into the Mew because he doesn't want his Torn to take extra damage, and the Mew gets Thunder Waved. This is obviously very difficult for Jolt because he can no longer taunt the Pokemon on Astra's team that are going to be pivoting around the entire game, mainly the Umbreon and the Cresselia. Mew is able to get off a nice Super Fang on Piloswine, getting for 50% damage, and then he's able to pivot into his Mega Kangaskhan on the Stealth Rock, but Kang comes in, goes for return on the Umbreon switch-in, which is rocking the Rocky Helmet, no pun intended, and for the next several turns, Astra is going to go back and forth between his Umbreon and Cresselia, and the Umbreon will be inviting in Cobalion on several turns, and the Cobalion invites in the Cresselia. The Cobalion Volt switches into Mew, but Mew, being paralyzed, isn't able to really prevent any of the Wish shenanigans from Umbreon and things like that. There comes a turn later in the game where finally Blastoise gets healed up from a Wish rather than the Cresselia or other Mons. And Cobalion is going to Volt Switch into Kangaskhan, as the Blastoise does get wished up to full. And then that invites in the Umbreon one more time. It's going to get off the critical Rocky Helmet damage on the Kang. It's going to heal all the status on his team with a Heal Bell. It heals a Paralysis on Cresselia, and it heals a Toxic on Blastoise. It'll eventually get a kill on me with Foul Play, and when all is said and done, it brings Scolipede to about 10% HP, and just before it dies to the combination of Mega Horn plus Earthquake. Jolt's going to end up preserving his Scolipede as a sack. He's going to bring in the Cobalion in on the Piloswine, which had switched in for the fainted Umbreon. The Cresselia is going to switch in on that Cobalion, and pretty much the similar thing happens. Cress is able to really wear down Jolt's team. It's never going to get low. It is able to survive a crunch from Kangaskhan quite easily. It survives a bunch of U-turns and hurricanes from Torn. It's able to get Jolt to sack his Scolipede, and then the last Mon remaining on the field is a Cobalion, which dies to a couple of Psychics. And that is going to give Astra a 4-0 victory in his favor. Jolt definitely mentioned in his commentary, and Astra said as well, that the misses at the beginning of the match really put Jolt in an unfortunate position. You know, I'm not going to say that Jolt would have won or anything if those those plays hadn't happened the way they did, you know, those misses. But it certainly would have played out differently.
Yeah, it's hard to call something that deals with hacks, especially when it's that early on. I mean, had it been turn 50 and there was a missed hurricane that would have resulted in the victory right there, well, okay, then that makes sense. But, you know, turn 5, it's hard to say. Definitely would have been a different battle, though.
And that's going to wrap it up for our games this week. Zilix, why don't you take us into the playoff standings?
Yeah, so speaking of the playoffs, currently we do have Astra at the top. The Montreal Habsels 4-0 with a plus 15 differential. Followed by them is the Texas Rangers 3-1 with a plus 8. The Toronto Star Raptors dropping down from being tied in first, I believe, down to the number 3 spot with a 3-1 with a plus 7 differential. Then we have the Durham Ratigans also 3-1 with a plus 5 differential. For our 2-2 teams, we have the Rose Radenborg with a plus 4 and the Newcastle Umbreon with a minus 1. And for 1-3 teams, we have the LA Colville with minus 4, the Memphis Grizzlies with minus 8, and the Norwich Skitty with minus 11. And then at 0-4, we have the New York Lynx at minus 15.
There's a lot of teams that I guess I would quote-unquote expect to be at the top. At this point in the season, I'm really impressed with HLD Productions, aka Randy. He's really applied a ton of offensive pressure in all of his games, and he's been rewarded by having the current number 2 seed.
Yeah, and not only does he have the number 2 seed, but transitions are cool. He has number 2 in the kill leaders with Tapu Koko. So moving on to the kill leaders, we have Cresselia at number 1, which is 8-1 with a plus 7 differential. We have Tapu Koko, also 8-1 with a plus 7 differential. Then we have Scolipede, which has 6 kills, 3 deaths. Nihilego, also with 6 kills, 3 deaths. We have Infernape, which is 5-0. Mega Aerodactyl 5-2, Mega Absol also 5-2, Magearna also 5-2. Then we have Mega Gallade, which is 4-2, and the Landorus T, which is 4-4.
With that, we are going to conclude our Week 4 recap. When we come back to you guys next week, the season will be more than halfway over, which is kind of hard to believe. It seems like we just started with the GBA D-League. But I've been having a lot of fun, Zilix has been having a lot of fun, and we look forward to all the games to come. Zilix, do you have anything you'd like to add before we sign off?
Not much. I'll see you guys next week.
Alright, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like the video and subscribe for more analyst videos like the power rankings, the GBA fantasy, and make sure you check out all of our fantastic coaches. And until the next time, we will see you guys later. Peace.